Late one evening, a young drawing teacher is walking alone along a quiet road outside London. Suddenly, a frightened woman dressed entirely in white steps from the darkness and asks for his help. She seems desperate to escape someone, or something, but refuses to explain exactly what has happened to her. Before the night is over, the teacher learns that this mysterious stranger has escaped from an asylum. Then he travels to a remote country house and meets a wealthy young woman who bears an extraordinary resemblance to the woman in white. What begins as a strange coincidence soon becomes a dangerous mystery involving a forced marriage, a stolen identity, a secret inheritance, and a carefully constructed conspiracy. As lies close around the innocent and the guilty hide behind wealth, charm, and respectability, one question becomes increasingly urgent. Can the truth be uncovered before a young woman loses not only her fortune and freedom, but her very identity? This is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. My name is Roger Braveheart, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Classic Tales by Firelight. On this channel, remarkable works of classic fiction are reshaped into vivid, accessible retellings designed to preserve the suspense, emotion, and atmosphere of the original stories. You might choose to listen closely from beginning to end, or let the story accompany you while you travel, work, rest, or take care of something else. In this haunting mystery, drawing teacher Walter Hartright becomes drawn into the lives of Laura Fairlie and her devoted half-sister Marian Halcombe after his strange encounter with a distressed woman dressed in white. What follows is a gripping tale of forbidden love, concealed identities, manipulation, greed, unlawful confinement, and a conspiracy designed to make the truth almost impossible to prove. By the time the story reaches its conclusion, you'll be familiar with its central characters, major events, hidden connections, and the mysteries that hold the entire novel together. My task is to condense this long and intricately constructed book into a compelling retelling, while retaining its essential clues, relationships, revelations, and steadily increasing sense of danger. Most of the condensed classics featured here last roughly 75 minutes, rather than the many hours normally required to read the complete novel. Earlier, I experimented with summaries closer to 30 minutes, but that shorter length left too little room for the characters, atmosphere, and more intricate parts of the plot to develop properly. This expanded format allows the mystery to unfold at a more natural pace, while still providing a much quicker and more approachable way to experience the book. This version draws upon Wilkie Collins's original novel, rather than later films, television productions, or theatrical adaptations, which may rearrange events, simplify characters, or introduce changes for dramatic effect. So, with the introductions complete, let the mystery begin. Walter Hartright is 28, a teacher of drawing in London, and as the story begins, he is weary, short of money, and low in spirits in the heavy heat of late July. His father, a successful drawing master before him, died some years ago and left Walter's mother and sister comfortably settled in a cottage at Hampstead, and it is on one of Walter's weekly evenings with them that everything starts. Waiting at the cottage is Professor Pesca, a tiny, warm-hearted Italian who teaches languages in the fine London houses and who regards Walter as the saviour of his life. Some time earlier, at Brighton, Pesca had tried to swim as if it were an English sport and nearly drowned. Walter dived and pulled him from the bottom, and the little professor has longed ever since to repay the debt. That evening he announces in wild delight that the chance has come. A rich merchant has asked him to recommend a drawing master for a country house in Cumberland. The employer is a gentleman of Limmeridge House, who wants a competent man for 4 months to teach 2 young ladies watercolour and to repair a valuable collection of neglected drawings. The terms are 4 guineas a week, residence in the house, and treatment on the footing of a gentleman. Walter's mother and sister are enchanted and Pesca is beside himself with joy. Yet Walter himself feels an inexplicable unwillingness to stir in the matter. He raises petty objections, hears them answered one by one, and at last, ashamed of his own perversity and unable to resist Pesca's tears, he gives way, sends his testimonials, and is accepted. The next night he takes leave of his mother and sister and sets out near midnight to walk home by the loneliest paths across the heath for the sake of the cool air. At the place where 4 roads meet, with London lying in a black gulf below him, a hand is laid lightly on his shoulder from behind, and every drop of blood in his body stops. He turns, and there stands a solitary woman dressed from head to foot in white, as if she had sprung out of the earth. She asks in a still, rapid voice if that is the road to London. By the moonlight he sees a colourless, youthful face, meagre about the cheeks and chin, large, grave, wistful eyes and nervous lips. Her manner is quiet and self-controlled, a little melancholy and a little suspicious. She says she has met with an accident. She has a friend in London who will receive her, if he will show her where to get a carriage, and promise not to interfere with her, letting her leave him when and how she pleases. Her loneliness touches him, and against all the caution an older, colder man might have felt, he gives the promise. As they walk on together, her questions grow stranger. Does he know many people in London? Many men of rank and title, many of the rank of baronet. She hopes for her own sake that there is one baronet he does not know, though she dare not say his name. And when Walter answers that he is only a drawing master, she takes his arm with sudden relief. Not a man of rank, thank God, so she may trust him. She has been cruelly used and cruelly wronged, she says, but she cannot talk of it. When he tells her he's going north to Cumberland, she repeats the word tenderly. She was once happy there, at Limmeridge village and Limmeridge House. Mrs. Fairlie is dead, and her husband too, but if any of that name are left, she loves them for Mrs. Fairlie's sake. Walter is staggered by the coincidence, but at the turnpike her impatience to be driven away overcomes everything. He finds a cab, she kisses his hand, and is gone into the darkness. Minutes later, an open chaise overtakes him, and its 2 occupants stop a policeman to ask if he has seen a woman pass, a woman in white. If she is found, she is to be stopped and sent in careful keeping to a given address. Asked what she has done, one of the men answers that she has escaped from his asylum. Walter hears it with a sick heart. What has he done? Help the victim of a false imprisonment, or cast loose on London an unfortunate creature who ought mercifully to be controlled? He had seen nothing in her to justify the word asylum, and he can see nothing now. Sleepless he packs, and in the morning he leaves London for Cumberland. The engine breaks down, and it is past 10 at night before he reaches Limmeridge House, where a solemn servant gives him a lonely supper and shows him to his room. He sleeps in the house like a friend of the family without having seen one of its inmates. Morning opens the sea and the distant blue coast of Scotland before his window, and at breakfast he meets a lady standing at the far window, tall, graceful, beautifully formed, and then, as she turns to him, strangely ugly of face, with a dark complexion, a firm masculine mouth and jaw, thick coal-black hair growing low, and prominent, piercing brown eyes. This is Marian Halcombe, and her odd, frank welcome wins him immediately. She explains the household with mocking candour. Her sister is nursing a headache, tended by her old governess. Her uncle, the master of the house, is an invalid who never joins their meals. Her mother was twice married, first to Marian's father, then to Laura's father, So the two young women are half-sisters and both orphans. Laura has a fortune and is fair and pretty. Marian has nothing and is dark and ugly, yet they are honestly fond of each other. Walter tells her of his midnight adventure and of the stranger's grateful mention of the late mistress of Limmeridge, Laura's mother. Marian is all aflame with curiosity. The woman was once at school in the village and was treated with kindness by her mother, but no clue to her name exists. Marian will search her mother's letters that very evening, and Walter is to say nothing yet to her uncle or her sister, who are nervous in their different ways. He is then shown his own luxurious sitting room, with its easel and all the materials for mounting drawings, and is conducted at last to the uncle's apartments. The master of Limmeridge reclines in a sea-green twilight, among coins, cabinets, china, and a Madonna attributed to Raphael, a frail, pale, beardless man past 50, effeminately dressed, his white fingers toying with a medal. In the wretched state of his nerves, movement is painful, loud sound is torture, and the light itself is too much for his eyes. He receives Walter with languid, croaking politeness, stops him to have drawers of coins fetched and replaced, and rings for his valet to bring tablets and portfolios, begging pardon 1,000 times for his weakness. Walter soon perceives that the invalid's nerves and the invalid's selfish affectation are one and the same thing. He carries the portfolio of precious, ill-treated drawings to his room himself, closes the baize doors behind him, and breathes as freely as a diver coming to the surface. His plan is formed on the spot, never to seek the master of the house again unless invited. So his new life begins. Quiet mornings over damaged watercolours, an employer he need hardly see, and the promise of meeting his two pupils at luncheon. Marian's search of the letters has found nothing yet, but 3 packets remain, and she means to spend the evening over them. And Walter, restless as the afternoon comes, feels that 2 discoveries are close at hand: the identity of the woman in white, and the face of the sister he has not yet seen. At luncheon, Walter meets the old governess, a placid, drowsy lady, and then Marian leads him to the summer house, where his other pupil is waiting. Laura Fairlie is fair, delicate, and blue-eyed, in a simple striped muslin dress and straw hat, trifling with a sketchbook. Her charm lies less in perfect features than in the clear truthfulness of her eyes. Walter is enchanted, and yet troubled by a strange sense of something wanting that he cannot define. They drive out with the sketchbooks, and he is soon attending more to her voice than to the scenery. In the evening there is Mozart in the drawing-room, and moonlight instead of lamps, while Marian reads her mother's letters by the piano candles. One letter to Laura's father, written some 11 years earlier, describes a new scholar at the village school, a little girl named Anne Catherick, brought by her mother from Hampshire, slow of intellect, but sweet and grateful. Laura's mother had some of her daughter's old white frocks altered for the child, who kissed her hand and declared she would always wear white as long as she lived, to remember her by. But the letter's real surprise is its ending. Although not half so pretty, this Anne Catherick is, by an extraordinary caprice of chance, the living likeness of Laura, in her hair, her complexion, the colour of her eyes, and the shape of her face. As Marian reads, Laura passes on the terrace, a white figure in the moonlight, and Walter's doubt flashes into conviction. The woman in white is Anne Catherick, and the something wanting in Laura's face was his own unconscious recognition of the ominous likeness between them. Marian and Walter keep the discovery secret between them. The golden weeks pass, and Walter's confession escapes him almost before he knows it. He loves her. The dangerous intimacy of teacher and pupil bending together over the sketchbook, her ribbons brushing his cheek. undoes all his trained self-command. Then a change comes over her. She has discovered his secret, and, too truthful to deceive, she cannot hide her sorrow, and Marian's eyes begin to watch him constantly. At last, Marian takes him to the summer house and tells him, with generous bluntness, that she has discovered his attachment. She does not blame him, but he must leave Limmeridge, not because he is a drawing master, but because Laura Fairlie is engaged to be married. It is an engagement of honour, not of love. Her father sanctioned it on his deathbed 2 years since, and she was content to make it. Walter asks the gentleman's name, a man of large property in Hampshire, Anne Catherick's native place, Sir Percival Glyde, a baronet of course, and Anne's anxious question about baronets comes back to him with a chill of fatality. That same morning, a letter addressed to Laura in a strange handwriting has arrived, brought by an old woman to a young gardener. It is an anonymous warning. The writer recounts a dream of Laura's wedding and describes the bridegroom in minute detail. About 45, pale, bald over the forehead, with brown beard and bright brown eyes, a dry hacking cough, and the red scar of an old wound across the back of his right hand. Looking into his inmost heart, the dreamer sees it black as night, written in flaming letters, without pity and without remorse. Behind the man a fiend laughing, behind Laura an angel weeping, and the marriage service is gone out of the book. The writer begs Laura to inquire into the past life of the man with the scar before she becomes his miserable wife, and signs nothing, saying only that Laura's mother was her first, her best, her only friend. Marian confirms that the description is accurate to Sir Percival, even to the scar he got years ago in Italy. The old woman who brought the letter was a stranger who hurried away south, and the village search comes to nothing. At the school, a boy is being punished for insisting he saw a ghost the evening before, a figure all in white standing in the churchyard by the marble cross over the grave of Laura's mother. Marian is indignant at the answer. Walter draws the opposite conclusion. The writer of the letter and the ghost in the churchyard are one and the same person, Anne Catherick. At the grave he finds half the marble block newly cleaned, though the ailing sexton has been unable to crawl to church for months. So Walter resolves to watch the grave that evening. Hidden in the church porch at sunset, he sees 2 women approach, one elderly, in bonnet and shawl, the other cloaked, a white gown beneath. The elder walks off among the trees, and the younger kneels with a wet cloth to cleanse the inscription, kissing the white cross. Walter approaches gently, and the terrified creature gradually knows him, the same face that looked into his on the high road. He wins her confidence by showing how he helped her escape the men from the asylum. The asylum, she says, was a private one, not far from where they met. Her friend, an old neighbour who had cared for her as a child and had written a promise in her prayer book, took her in gladly. Of her father she knows nothing. Of her mother she says only that they are a trouble and a fear to each other. Walter leads her on and tricks her into confessing that she wrote the anonymous letter, and urges her to trust Laura, who will be as good and kind as her mother was. But when he pronounces Sir Percival Glyde's name, a scream bursts from her, and the look of intense hatred and fear that follows tells all. It was Sir Percival who shut her up in the asylum, and her mother was guiltless of it. Her companion hurries up, indignant on her behalf. Anne forgives Walter, kisses the grave, and goes with her friend over the moor. He tells Marian, who means to see Anne herself next day at the farm where the 2 women are lodging. But in the morning, Anne and her friend are gone suddenly, after the dairymaid from Limmeridge, gossiping at the farm the evening before, had mentioned that Sir Percival Glyde was expected at the house on Monday. The women would not say where they were going, and begged that no one would question them. Marian and Walter exchange a look, There is no doubt now. Sir Percival shall remove that doubt, she says, or Laura Fairlie shall never be his wife. That day the family solicitor arrives from London, and Walter spends his last hours wandering alone through the places that remind him of Laura: the rose garden, the avenue, the hill, the beach. Marian persuades him to stay for dinner, and the evening passes in a brave pretence of cheerfulness, with whist and Laura at the piano playing the Mozart melodies he loves, as if music were her only refuge. In the dim morning there is a restrained, heartbroken farewell. Marian promises to trust him as a brother, and Laura comes back alone to give him a little sketch of the summer house where they first met. He begs her to remember the poor drawing master, if ever his devotion can give her a moment's happiness, or spare her a moment's sorrow. She promises with all her heart, weeping, and at last, her secret breaking from her, begs him for God's sake to leave her. He goes. The great gulf of separation has opened, and the image of Laura Fairlie is already, as he thinks, a memory of the past. The family solicitor, an old and trusted friend of 2 generations of the family, takes up the story. He arrives at Limmeridge in November to prepare for the marriage, meets Walter briefly and likes him, and on the Monday Sir Percival Glyde arrives. The baronet is a most prepossessing man, rather older than expected, bald over the forehead, his face marked and worn, but active, high-spirited, and full of easy tact. He raises the matter of the anonymous letter himself, and offers a simple explanation. Mrs. Catherick, he says, once laid him under obligations for faithful services to his family. She had been doubly unfortunate, deserted by her husband, and burdened with an only child whose mind had been disturbed from an early age. When the daughter's condition made restraint necessary, the mother shrank from the prejudice of a public asylum, and Sir Percival, respecting her honest independence, defrayed the cost of a trustworthy private one. The unhappy girl discovered his share in it, and conceived an intense hatred of him, which, after her escape, expressed itself in the anonymous letter. He offers every particular, the address of the asylum and the names of the 2 doctors, and has already ordered his solicitor to spare no expense in tracing her. The old lawyer declares the explanation unquestionably satisfactory. Marian, after a visible hesitation, agrees, and Sir Percival delicately presses his advantage. He begs her, as a favour, to write to Mrs. Catherick herself, asking whether the daughter was placed in the asylum with her mother's knowledge, and whether his own share merited gratitude. Marian cannot refuse. She writes, and he seals the note without reading it, gracefully leaving the contents to her. The solicitor notices one small thing. Laura's cross little greyhound shrinks snarling from Sir Percival's hand, though it had jumped familiarly into the old lawyer's lap. Mrs. Catherick's answer is short, sharp, and to the point, confirming everything. Sir Percival then begs Marian to tell Laura that if she seriously wishes to be released, she has only to recall the circumstances of the engagement and his own conduct, and say so with her own lips. He will sacrifice himself and leave her free. Marian is troubled in a way she can hardly explain. Such a message, she tells the solicitor, indirectly obliges her to force Laura's inclinations, for it appeals to the 2 strongest feelings in Laura's nature, her love for her father's memory, and her strict regard for truth. She will not accept the responsibility of persuading her sister to this marriage. Laura, when told, checks all discussion by begging for time. If Sir Percival will spare her for the present, he shall have his final answer before the end of the year. The solicitor, obliged to return to London, obtains a private interview with her. She is pale, sad, and nervously restless. He explains her prospects and the purpose of a settlement, the Limmeridge land, which will be hers for life if her uncle dies without a son, and her own money, £20,000 absolutely hers at 21, besides the income of 10,000 more that must go at her death to her aunt, who married an Italian count against her brother's will. Laura's only request is that Marian shall never be parted from her, and that if she dies first, her money shall go to Marian, and to someone else besides, though she cannot bring herself to name him. She breaks down. The old lawyer comforts her as if she were a child again, and leaves, secretly hoping matters may yet end in her claiming her release. A week later, Marian's letter announces that Sir Percival has been accepted, and the marriage will take place before the end of the year. Now comes the battle of the settlement. The solicitor insists that the £20,000 go to Laura's children, or, failing children, to heirs of her own choosing. Sir Percival's solicitor rules in red ink that the whole sum must go to Sir Percival if he survives her childless. The lawyers reach a deadlock and refer to their clients. Sir Percival leaves everything to his man of business. Laura's guardian, her invalid uncle, writes back that peace and quiet are worth more than a remote chance of £20,000. The old solicitor journeys to Cumberland to fight in person and finds his client unchanged. The valet held up before him as a portfolio stand, the etchings, the mock politeness. He is called a radical for hating rank. He is assured that no young woman of 21 will die before a man of 45 without children, and he is politely dismissed. He signs the altered settlement under protest, recording for the future that no daughter of his should have been married to any man alive on such terms. Marian's diary carries the story forward. Laura, unable to bear concealment, tells Sir Percival the truth with her own lips. A love has grown up in her heart that was not there when she promised. Though no word has ever passed between her and the other man, and they will never meet again. She will not ask her release. The breaking of the engagement must be his act alone. Sir Percival, pale and shaken, answers that she has shown herself the noblest of her sex, and that he cannot resign a woman of such priceless truth. He will hope to deserve her love. Laura is left inflexibly resigned. She locks away her sketching things and gives Marian the album of Walter's drawings, with a lock of her own hair pinned inside. If she dies first, Walter is to have it, and to be told that she loved him. The marriage day is fixed for the 22nd of December. Walter, by Marian's exertions, sails with an expedition to Central America. His farewell letter speaks of strange men watching him, and Marian, frightened, burns it. The wedding passes in a whirl of confusion and tears. The old governess's shawl, the uncle's shabby ring, the bridegroom's restless pacing, and then they are married and gone to Italy. 6 months later, Marian opens her diary again at Blackwater Park, Sir Percival's damp, tree-choked house in Hampshire, on the eve of the traveller's return. The house is an architectural jumble, an Elizabethan main body, a ruined 14th century wing, and a modern wing made comfortable for the bride. In the old boathouse by the stagnant lake, Marian finds a wounded spaniel shot by the keeper. The housekeeper recognises it as the dog of a visitor from the day before, a respectable, sour woman named Mrs. Catherick, who had come asking for news of her lost daughter, and who left abruptly, begging that her visit be kept secret from Sir Percival. The travellers return. Laura is changed, more colour and decision in her face, but the old freshness gone, and she is resolutely silent about her married life. She begs Marian never to marry and leave her. Sir Percival is thinner, abrupt, and possessed by a new mania for order, storming at the servants. With them come Count Fosco and his wife, Laura's aunt, a woman once vain and talkative, now frozen into silent submission, rolling her husband's cigarettes and watching him with the eyes of a faithful dog. The Count himself is immense, with the grand face of Napoleon, unfathomable grey eyes, and a smooth 60-year-old face. His white mice crawl over him as he coos to them, his canaries perch on his fingers, and he tames a savage bloodhound by looking it in the eye. He's a chemist, a musician, a talker of irresistible charm, and Marian, against her judgment, feels him winding his way into her good opinion. Into this household comes Sir Percival's solicitor, unannounced, and Sir Percival, startled into angry alarm, hurries to meet him. Something has happened. Passing the library, Marian overhears Sir Percival and his solicitor in guarded talk, and the meaning is plain, a serious money embarrassment and relief depending on Laura. She is to sign her name to a deed within the week, in the presence of witnesses. If that is done, the arrangement succeeds, and the anxiety is over. If not, they must accept bills at 3 months with no clear way to pay them when due. Sir Percival swears the money shall be got in the one way. Marian tells Laura, who receives the news with surprising calm. She feared as much when a stranger called and refused his name. She will do anything honest to help her husband, but she will sign nothing she has not read. That morning, the whole party walks to the lake, and the boathouse talk turns dangerous. Sir Percival calls the lake just the place for a murder. The Count, playing with his white mice, answers smoothly that crimes divide into those of fools, which are found out, and those of wise men, which are not, and he mocks the comfortable maxim that crime causes its own detection, to Laura's indignation and Sir Percival's loud applause. Then, hunting a lost mouse under the seat, the Count finds a spot of dried blood and turns livid. Marian explains, it is the blood of the wounded spaniel she found there, the dog the housekeeper had identified as Mrs. Catherick's. Sir Percival pushes forward, harshly demanding how the housekeeper knew, and what Mrs. Catherick wanted at Blackwater at all. The Count soothes him, and Sir Percival drives off alone on a long journey towards Welmingham, Marian suspects, where Mrs. Catherick lives. But first he insists that Laura come into the library for a mere business formality. The scene in the library is the crisis. Sir Percival produces a parchment, folded so that only a strip for signatures shows, and orders Laura to sign without reading. It is full of legal technicalities she cannot understand, and there is no time. The dog-cart is waiting. Laura, pale but steady, asks what the signature pledges her to. He strikes the table and bids her say in plain terms that she distrusts him. Marian, appealed to, declares she cannot witness a signature to a writing her sister has not read. Sir Percival's rage breaks bounds when Laura pleads that his indulgence to the Count's scruples might extend to hers. He sneers that she should have got over scruples when she made a virtue of necessity by marrying him. At those words, Laura throws down the pen with a look of open contempt and turns her back on him. The Count, who has watched everything, breathes the word idiot and then masters the situation. The signature can wait until tomorrow. Sir Percival should take his drive. The baronet, torn between his secret journey and the signature, yields with a threat and goes. That evening, in the boathouse, Laura tells Marian the truth about her marriage. His contempt dried her tears and hardened her heart. At Rome, before the tomb of Cecilia Metella, he had mocked her longing for tenderness, and from that hour she had let the forbidden memory of Walter comfort her. Then, at a party, an English lady who sketched spoke warmly of a drawing master named Hartright, and Laura's face betrayed her. Sir Percival locked the door and told her he had found the man at last. She should repent it, and Walter should repent it, to the last hour of their lives. He had known since her confession at Limmeridge that she loved another. Now he knew the name. As they talk, a living figure moves through the mist on the heath, and light footsteps follow them home through the plantation, with a long, heavy sigh among the trees. They agree to say nothing. Silence is safe, and they have need of safety in that house. Marian writes to the family solicitor's partner for advice, and is startled when she takes her letter from the post bag to seal it more carefully, to find the envelope unaccountably ungummed. The next day, Laura keeps her appointment at the boathouse and finds Anne Catherick there, pale, worn and dying, with the lost brooch she had found on the floor. Anne has risked everything to come. She heard Laura tell Marian she had no influence over her husband, and her conscience brought her to make atonement. She is not afraid of him now, because she is dying. There is a secret he is afraid of, she says. Her mother knows it. And once, when Anne was grown, her mother said something to her. If Laura knows his secret, he will be afraid of her, and must treat her mercifully. But before she can say more, she stops, whispers that they are watched, and makes Laura promise to come alone tomorrow at the same time. Laura, terrified, lets her go. The Count, meanwhile, has intercepted Marian outside the lodge, the lawyer's answer in her hand. His manner is all courtesy, and within the hour Sir Percival's plans change. The signature is put off, the bills adopted. Marian is sure the Count knows everything. Next day, Laura finds the boathouse empty. In the sand, under the word "look" written large, is a scrap of paper in Anne's hand. She was seen with Laura by a tall, stout old man, and had to run to save herself. She dare not come back today. When they speak next of her wicked husband's secret, they must speak safely, or not at all. Sir Percival has already dug it up, read it, and buried it again for her to find. He seizes her arm, demands every word Anne said, bruises her, drags her home, and locks her in her room, dismissing her maid, the one devoted servant, and setting the dull, obstinate housemaid to guard the door. He is mad with the terrors of a guilty conscience. He believes Laura knows the secret, and he swears he will wring it out of her. Marian, locked out, confronts him in the library, and the Count and his wife, with a sudden show of chivalry, declare they will not remain in a house where ladies are so treated. Sir Percival, baffled, yields. Laura's door is opened, but the Countess has overheard Laura call her husband a spy, and Marian sees the malice in her white face. Marian writes 2 letters, one to the lawyer's partner, one to Laura's uncle, begging him to receive Laura at Limmeridge, and entrusts them to the dismissed maid at the village inn, for the post-bag at Blackwater is not safe. Sir Percival thumps on Laura's door, swearing she knows where Anne Catherick is, and that he will wring it out of her. That night, unable to sleep for thinking of the long-delayed private talk between Sir Percival and the Count, Marian sees 2 cigar sparks meet in the dark below her window. The men are on the lawn. She dresses in dark clothes, slips out onto the veranda roof, and creeps along it to crouch among the flower pots above the library window. There, for hours in the falling rain, she hears everything. The money first. The bills are raised, but when they fall due, there is no way to pay them except through Lady Glyde, her signature to the deed if she lives, and her £20,000 if she dies. Does he care about his wife? The Count asks. And when Sir Percival will not answer, the Count coolly talks of her dying before the summer is out. Then the second difficulty. Anne Catherick is in the neighbourhood, and in communication with Lady Glyde. Sir Percival is a lost man if she is not found, for his wife and that vagabond drawing-master Hartright both know the secret, and it is their interest to ruin him. Hartright is watched, and out of the country, the Count will find Anne, and he winds up with a grandiose declaration of sublime friendship, forgiving Sir Percival's suspicions. Marian creeps back along the roof, drenched and frozen, and by morning she is burning with fever. Her diary falters and breaks off into fragments, and at its end appears a postscript in a large, firm hand. Count Fosco has read every page. He admires her enormously, laments the cruel necessity that opposes them, assures her the information will not help him against her plans, and signs himself, with respectful tenderness, her sincere friend. The story passes to Laura's uncle at Limmeridge, the invalid master of the house, who complains that nobody will let him alone. Laura's dismissed maid arrives with a letter from Marian. She is confused and tearful, and through his valet the uncle extracts her story. After leaving Blackwater, she had slept at the inn where the Countess unexpectedly appeared, offered to bring forgotten messages from Marian, insisted on making tea and drinking a cup with her, and the girl fainted dead away, the first faint of her life. She woke on the sofa with only the landlady. The Countess had gone. The 2 letters were safe in her bosom, though strangely crumpled, but the supplementary messages were never delivered, and the girl is afraid her mistress will think her neglectful. The uncle, bored and faintly alarmed, dismisses her with a good morning. Marian's letter threatens all sorts of horrors if he will not turn Limmeridge into an asylum for Laura and her misfortunes. But fearing Sir Percival's violent resentment if he harbours the wife, he writes back, temporising, let Marian come alone first and answer his objections. Days pass, and no Marian comes. Then the lawyer's partner writes that he has received from Marian a letter containing nothing but a blank sheet of paper, a circumstance so suspicious, suggesting tampering, that he is making inquiries. The uncle knows nothing and says so. 5 quiet days follow, and then Count Fosco himself is announced. The Count is alarmingly large but charming. He adjusts the light for the invalid's comfort, admires the art treasures, and speaks of nerves as one who has studied them. His bad news is that Marian is ill, a fever caught from being wetted through by rain. He has 2 objects. First, to bear testimony that Marian's letter exaggerated nothing. The disagreements between Sir Percival and Lady Glyde are real. A temporary separation is the one peaceable remedy, and when all causes of irritation are removed, he will undertake to bring Sir Percival to reason. Second, to secure what Marian's illness prevented her asking, an invitation for Laura to come to Limmeridge alone. Sir Percival's affairs are embarrassed. Offered his freedom by his wife's absence, he will take it and return to the continent, and he will not come near the house or attempt to communicate while she is in it. The uncle hesitates. Laura is too unwell to travel alone, and too much a stranger to stop at a London hotel. The Count removes both objections in a breath. He has just taken a little furnished house in St. John's Wood. Laura shall travel to London, rest a night at her aunt's house, and go on to Cumberland, where her own maid will receive her. The uncle, seeing no danger that Laura will consent to leave while Marian lies ill, writes the invitation with flattering speed. Dearest Laura, please come whenever you like. Break the journey by sleeping at your aunt's house. The Count departs delighted. The uncle fumigates his room and feels quite exhausted and heartbroken. The housekeeper at Blackwater Park, a clergyman's widow, continues the story. Marian's fever worsened to typhus. The Count had an affable war with the local doctor, a respectable elderly man, opposing his lowering treatment with amateur learning. The doctor declined to consult with an amateur. The Countess fetched a nurse from London, a small wiry foreigner, quiet and watchful, who proved competent and gave no handle for complaint, though the doctor insisted she must go at the first fault. A physician from London confirmed the typhus, and on the 10th day Marian was pronounced out of danger. But the Count then taunted the local doctor over his mistake so insolently that the doctor appealed to Sir Percival and, unsupported, withdrew his attendants and left the house. Sir Percival next dismissed the whole body of indoor servants in a day. Keeping only the dull housemaid and the housekeeper was sent to Torquay to take lodgings she felt sure she could never find. A fool's errand. When she returned, the Count and Countess had left for London, and she was told Marian had gone with them, on her way to Cumberland. But Marian had left without bidding her own sister goodbye, and presently the housekeeper, to her horror, found the foreign nurse still at Blackwater, and learned the truth. Marian had never left the house. She was hidden, helpless, in the disused old wing with a nurse to guard her. Laura was told her sister had gone ahead to prepare their uncle. Too weak and anxious to resist, and promised that she would sleep in London at her aunt's house, an arrangement her uncle's own note sanctioned, Laura let herself be sent to London alone, though she dreaded the Count's house and begged the housekeeper to post a letter to her old governess with her own hand. Her parting with Sir Percival was strange. She told him this was their parting, perhaps forever, and asked him to forgive her as heartily as she forgave him. He turned white. Great beads of perspiration on his bald forehead said he should come back, and hurried away. And he never did come back. The housekeeper, discovering Marian's prison, resigned her situation, but stayed for Marian's sake. And that night Sir Percival, in a frenzy of panic, drove away from his own house like an escaped criminal, and vanished. Then come the testimonies of the death. The cook at the St. John's Wood house, a hard-working woman who cannot write, describes how the lady called Lady Glyde arrived and was seized with a sudden fright and fits of convulsions. The nearest doctor was fetched. He listened at her heart through a little wooden trumpet, and said it was heart disease of a most dangerous kind. The Count wrung his fat hands and picked trumpery nosegays for the sick-room. The lady lingered, worn out, and on the 25th of July she fainted and was dead. The doctor, to save the foreign family trouble, registered the death himself. Aneurysm, duration of disease not known. The woman who prepared the body confirms that the coffin was screwed down in her presence. The funeral was at Limmeridge, the Count attending in deep mourning, and the tombstone over the grave of Laura's mother received a new inscription. Laura, Lady Glyde, born March 27, 1829, married December 22, 1849, died July 25, 1850. At last, Walter Hartright speaks again. The expedition to Central America had ended in failure. The survivors took ship for home and were wrecked in the Gulf of Mexico, Walter escaping death for the third time. He landed at Liverpool in October and reached London the same night, a changed man. He had gone out to fly from his own future and had come back to face it. But at his mother's cottage he reads the news in her face before she speaks. Laura is dead. For 3 days he bears it, then asks to go alone to the place where he first saw her. On a quiet autumn afternoon he comes over the moor to Limmeridge, down to the grey church and the white cross, and kneels at the tomb where mother and daughter now lie together. He reads the cruel black letters as far as the name, then goes round to the other side of the grave, where there is nothing to read, and lets his heart speak to her. Time flows on in silence. Then footsteps approach and stop. 2 women in veils stand looking towards the tomb. Marian Halcombe raises her veil, changed, wasted, her eyes full of a strange terror, and sinks to her knees, praying aloud that heaven will strengthen him. The other woman comes on slowly, stops at the grave, and lifts her veil. Laura, Lady Glyde, is standing by the inscription that records her death, looking at Walter over the grave. Walter takes up the story a week later. He and Marian and Laura are hidden in a poor street in the far east of London under an assumed name. He engraves on wood for the cheap periodicals, and the 2 women live as his sisters. To all the world besides, Laura is dead, dead to her uncle, to the servants, to the law, and alive only to them, robbed of her station, her beauty faded, her mind clouded. Walter has given her his life to vindicate her through all risks, though the justice of tribunals is powerless to help. Marian's story explains how it happened. After the housekeeper told her of Laura's departure for London, a letter came from the Countess announcing Laura's sudden death. The lawyer's partner, though kind and willing, could find nothing wrong, for the doctor, The servants and the Foscos all agreed, and he wrote that her suspicion was destitute of foundation. At Limmeridge, Marian found the Count's letter to the uncle, with a remarkable postscript. Anne Catherick had been traced and recaptured near Blackwater Park, and placed again under restraint, and her malady had taken a new form. She now fancied herself the late Lady Glyde, having observed the extraordinary likeness between them at a stolen interview. If she wrote annoying letters, they were to be received in that light. Marian's suspicion hardened. She had the St. John's Wood house privately watched, and the foreign nurse's new lodging too, without result. Sir Percival was living quietly in Paris. Then she determined to visit the asylum herself. From Walter's account she had the address. Armed with the Count's letter as a credential, she went. The keeper was reluctant, but showed her the patient and confessed his own perplexity. The woman brought back to him had changed in ways he could feel, but not describe. In the grounds, 2 women approached, and the supposed Anne Catherick looked eagerly at Marian, broke from the nurse and rushed into her arms. It was Laura. There was no time for questions. Marian bribed a young nurse with 3 sovereigns then, and a promise of £400, nearly her whole little fortune, for the woman's marriage portion. And the next day the nurse brought Laura out, dressed in the nurse's own bonnet and veil, while a false trail was laid pointing to Hampshire. They reached Limmeridge that night, but the uncle angrily refused to recognise her. The servants were uncertain, and the change in Laura's face, terribly deepened by her suffering, had strengthened the fatal likeness instead of weakening it. The pursuit from the asylum might turn to Cumberland at any hour, so Marian gave up the struggle to prove her sister's identity there, and the 2 fled alone to London. Laura's own memories are fragments. The Count met her train and drove her, not to St. John's Wood, but to a small street behind a square, where a bearded foreigner and 2 English strangers examined her with odd questions. The Count told her Marian was resting. Then, when she pressed that Marian was far more ill than he had said, a faintness overcame her. The water she was given tasted strange. The smelling salts finished it. After that, confusion. She believed she had gone to her old governess's house and been undressed by the foreign nurse, though she had never been near the house. Then a blank, until she woke in the asylum, answered to Anne Catherick's name, and found Anne Catherick's name marked on all her clothes. She was received there on the 27th of July, so the vile manner of it is plain. The likeness turned to a count. Anne introduced into the Count's house as Lady Glyde. Laura consigned to the asylum as Anne, with the doctor, the servants, perhaps the keeper, made innocent accomplices. And there is no mercy to expect. The conspiracy has gained the 2 men £30,000. Walter's hopes of legal proof collapse. The lawyer's partner, though courteous, tells him there is not the shadow of a case. The evidence of death is clear and satisfactory. Questions of identity are the hardest of all. The only useful proof would be a discrepancy between the date of the death certificate and the date of Laura's journey to London, and the only people who know the true date are Sir Percival and the Count. Walter leaves the office, followed by 2 spies, and learns that Sir Percival is back in London. The Count's letter to Marian follows. Fear nothing. Invite no dangerous publicity. Resignation is sublime, and if Mr. Hartright crosses the Count's path, he is a lost man. Marian, flushing, begs Walter that if he ever has those 2 men at his mercy, he will not spare the Count. Walter determines to act for himself. He goes to Hampshire to hunt the date. The local doctor's books cannot supply it. The inn where Sir Percival stopped that night is closed. The gardener knows only that his master drove off sometime in July. A lawyer's clerk in black is watching the house and tries to provoke him. Walter keeps his temper and comes away. Back in London, the farmer's wife at Todd's Corner answers Marian's letter with the address of Anne's loyal friend. Walter visits her, a good, simple woman who nursed Anne from a baby. After the flight from Limmeridge, she and Anne had gone to Derby, then London, then Grimsby, her late husband's town, where Anne's heart illness declared itself after the news of Laura's marriage appeared in the papers. Anne became resolved to return to Hampshire to speak to Lady Glyde, believing her death was near and that she had something on her mind. At a village near Blackwater, the Count found them. He gave Anne medicine himself, saw them off at the station, and in London the loyal friend wrote to Lady Glyde with their address. A fortnight later, an elderly lady called in a cab, decoyed her out on a pretext, and gave her the slip. When she returned, Anne was gone, lured out by a letter brought by a street boy. Inquiries at the asylum and at Welmingham came to nothing. Then the good woman reaches further back. At old Welmingham, her late husband had known the parish clerk, whose new wife had been a lady's maid at a great house called Varneck Hall, and who had come to him of her own accord after long refusing him. A stranger in mourning, Sir Percival, came to fish the river, and soon the clerk found lace handkerchiefs, 2 fine rings, and a gold watch and chain hidden in his wife's drawer, and found her whispering with Sir Percival under the vestry of the church. The clerk struck Sir Percival and was cruelly beaten. He vanished from England. The wife stayed, defiant, declaring herself the victim of a dreadful mistake, and her means of living came privately from Sir Percival. Walter reasons it through. The secret lies in those vestry meetings, and it is not Anne's paternity, for Anne was like neither Sir Percival nor her mother. He tells Anne's old friend, gently, that Anne is dead, promising her the details when he may safely speak, and asks for Mrs. Catherick's address. She warns him to think twice. At home, Laura has a new purpose. She will draw for money. Like Walter, the tender deception is kept up, her sketches are hidden away, and Walter pays her weekly earnings from his own purse. Then Walter goes to Welmingham, a dreary modern grid of a town, and Mrs. Catherick receives him in a gaudy parlour, hard-eyed and self-possessed. She mocks his errand and boasts how she has lived down her disgrace. The clergyman bows to her. She signs the town petition. Her Bible is as fine as any in the square. Walter presses her, and at his sudden mention of the vestry of the church she quails in blank terror. She recovers, refuses him, and lets fall 2 things: her bitter contempt for Sir Percival's great family, especially by the mother's side, and her expectation that the only news of Sir Percival she does not expect is the news of his death. As Walter leaves, the clergyman bows to her twice in one day, and she is visibly gratified. He has helped his cause a step forward, he feels, in spite of her. As Walter leaves Mrs. Catherick Square, he sees the lawyer's clerk from Blackwater hurry to the station for the Hampshire train, to report his visit, no doubt. That night he thinks it through. The vestry is the key. Mrs. Catherick's terror named it, and her contempt for Sir Percival's mother points to some stain on the mother, low birth or worse. The marriage register of the old church will tell. At old Welmingham the church stands alone among the ruins of the deserted village, and 2 men are watching it. One of the London spies, and a gamekeeper. The old parish clerk, cheerful and talkative, opens the vestry, a mouldy, raftered room with worm-eaten presses, hanging surplices, packing cases of broken carvings, and littered papers. The register is kept in a warped press with a common little lock. The clerk explains that his old master, a precise solicitor who was vestry clerk before him, always said it should be kept in an iron safe, and kept a posted duplicate at his office in Knowlesbury, riding over every quarter to check it against the original with his own eyes. Walter turns to September 1803 and finds the marriage. Sir Felix Glyde and Cecilia Jane Elster of Knowlesbury, only daughter of the late Patrick Elster. The entry is compressed at the bottom of a page, between the marriage of a man who shares Walter's Christian name, and, at the top of the next page, the double marriage of two brothers. It looks genuine, but Walter's hopes now hang on the duplicate. On the lonely road to Knowlesbury, the two spies hustle him, and he is charged with assault before the magistrate. It is a managed trap, and as a stranger without bail, he is remanded for 3 days. He gets a letter to the local doctor, who drives over at once, offers bail, and sets him free within hours, asking no questions. At the solicitor's office, the duplicate is produced. Same size, smarter binding, certified on its first page as compared entry by entry with the original. Walter finds the marriage of the man with his own name, and the double marriage of the brothers at the top of the next page, and between them, where the original shows the Glyde marriage compressed into the page bottom, the copy has nothing, a blank space. The entry in the church register is a forgery, inserted long after the copy was made. Sir Percival was not his father's legitimate son. He had no right to the name, the baronetcy, or Blackwater Park. The discovery that might have transported or hanged him is Walter's, and the man knows by this time that Walter is hunting him. Walter buys a stout cudgel and sets back across country at night in the rain. 3 men spring from a hedge. He fells one with a heavy blow and outruns the others over the fields, reaching Old Welmingham by the lanes. The clerk's cottage window stands open and the keys are gone. A servant waiting in the lane expecting his master mistakes Walter for Sir Percival. At the church, a village boy says someone went in, locked the door and struck a light. The vestry skylight blazes. There is a strange smell, a snapping of glass, and then a dreadful screaming for help behind the locked door. Sir Percival is inside, and the lock is hampered. Walter climbs to the roof on the servant's back and batters in the skylight, but the flame leaps out like a wild beast. The church key and the vestry key are on the same ring inside. The villagers haul a beam from a ruined cottage and burst the door at last, to find only a sheet of living fire. The town engine saves the church. The body is found against the inner door. Walter, who had sworn to bring the man to a terrible reckoning, finds he can feel nothing but the wish to have saved him. The inquest confirms the identity by the crest inside his watch. The servant is too shaken in mind to give evidence. No explanation of the keys, the fire, or his purpose is discovered, and the verdict is sudden death by accident. Walter keeps his silence. All proof is burnt, and a bare surmise could only harm the living. He reflects, too, that had Sir Percival lived, common honesty would have forced him to give the discovery to the stranger whose birthright was usurped, not to trade it as a bargain. He cannot bring himself to face Mrs. Catherick again. Her letter comes to him at the hotel in a disguised hand. She has heard the news, and she thanks him. His inquiries frightened Sir Percival into the vestry by night, and have served the hatred and wreaked the vengeance of 23 years. In payment, she tells him everything. The dead man never had a name of his own. His father and mother were never married, for the mother had a husband living in Ireland who had ill-used her and deserted her, and the son took possession of the property on his father's death because no one suspected. But he could not borrow on it without certificates of his birth and of his parents' marriage. The clergyman of his parents' own church was still alive, so he came to Old Welmingham, where the former clergyman was dead and his father had once lived privately with the lady. At first he meant only to tear out a leaf, then he saw the blank space at the bottom of the September page, and inserted a marriage, dating himself a 7-month child to fit it. Mrs. Catherick had got him the keys for presents. She watched him and learned all, and when her husband raised the scandal, Sir Percival refused to clear her name, because the false belief of her guilt was his best shield against suspicion of the truth. He frightened her with the punishment for forgery, then bought her a handsome quarterly allowance, on condition she stayed at Welmingham where he could always find her. Long after, in a quarrel, she called him an impostor she could ruin by letting out his secret, and Anne heard and repeated the words to his face the next day when he came, and called her an idiot. That is why Anne was shut up. She never knew the secret itself. She only knew there was one, and who would suffer by it. Mrs. Catherick ends by gloating, demanding an apology for his questions about Anne's father, and inviting him to tea at 5:30. Her buttered toast waits for nobody. Walter seals up the letter, for it may yet serve the question of Anne's parentage, and hurries home. Marian has moved them to Fulham. The Count had appeared in their street with the asylum keeper, but, after sending up a note, had let the man go without pointing out the house. For her sake, he declared, his one weakness is his admiration for her, and he risked the worst for it, asking only that she restrain Walter's rashness. His parting threat is that Fosco sticks at nothing. Walter tells Laura tenderly that her husband is dead. His name is spoken among them no more. The Count renews his lease and stays in London. Walter keeps his promise to Anne's old friend, telling her what he may, and writes to an old friend of Laura's father, the gentleman who owned Varneck Hall in those days. The answer comes: Sir Percival was never near the place, but Philip Fairlie stayed there in the autumn of 1826, and Anne was born in June 1827. The likeness is explained at last. 2 daughters of one father, one brought up in privilege, one in shame, and Mrs. Fairlie had loved the little stranger in perfect innocence of heart. The sins of the fathers are visited on the children. 4 months pass in quiet work and slow healing. Laura recovers all but her memory of the lost days. The old love revives between her and Walter, constrained and tender, till neither can look at the other long. At the seaside in April, Walter lays his purpose before Marian. When they return to London, he means to force the Count's confession, and before that risk he wants the right to protect Laura as her husband. Marian, who once parted them for their good, brings Laura to him herself. 10 days later they are married. A fortnight after the marriage, Laura murmurs in her sleep of the fatal journey from Blackwater, and Walter's resolution returns with tenfold strength. He reasons that the Count is a spy. It is the year of the Great Exhibition. Foreigners are pouring into England, and governments have sent their agents. The Count's official sealed letters, his interest in Italians settled in England, the foreign nurse who was so opportunely found, all fit. But of the man's history Walter knows nothing, and there is only one Italian he can trust, Professor Pesca. First, Walter watches the Count himself. Outside the house in Forest Road he hears the canaries and the deep voice. He follows him through the streets, while the Count buys a tart and gravely shares it with a street musician's monkey, shrugs off the musician himself, has an opera glass repaired, and takes a cab to the opera. Walter gets tickets for the pit and brings Pesca. Through the first act, the Count sits in bliss, patting his black-gloved hands and purring approval, grandly conscious of his influence over the barbarous English audience. In the interval, Walter points him out. Pesca does not know him, but the Count, looking down, sees Pesca. His face turns leaden, he goes rigid with mortal dread, and a slim foreigner with a scar on his cheek standing near watches the exchange with quiet attention before slipping out after the Count, who hurries from the theatre. At Pesca's lodgings, the little professor, white and trembling, makes his confession. He belongs to a secret brotherhood, a political society of the continent, whose principle is that a life which injures the well-being of others is forfeit, and whose members are known to their chiefs but not to one another, identified by a brand burnt deep into the arm. Betrayal is death by the hand of a stranger, or of a bosom friend sooner or later. Pesca was once its secretary in Italy, and all the members of that time were brought face to face with him. If the man at the opera knew him, then that man is of the brotherhood and false to it, and so altered or so disguised that Pesca does not know him. He begs Walter to tell him nothing more. Walter acts at once. He writes to Pesca. The man he pointed out is a member of the brotherhood, and has been false to his trust. On the love Pesca once bore him, used the power entrusted to him without mercy and without delay. He seals the letter, with instructions to open it at 9 the next morning, if he has not returned or written, and sends it by cab with the landlord's son. He looks in on Laura asleep, refuses Marian's plea to come with him, asking her instead to sleep in her sister's room so that his mind may be easy, and drives to St. John's Wood. The stranger with the scar is in the road outside. Walter sends in his card marked on important business, and is admitted. The Count is packing, his white mice in their cage on the table beside him. The confrontation is cool and deadly. The Count locks the door. His left hand slides to a drawer. Walter, knowing his life hangs by a thread, shows him Pesca's acknowledgment. The Count reads it, and his hand comes out of the drawer empty. They are cleverer brains than he thought them. Walter states his terms, a full written confession of the conspiracy, signed in his presence and plain proof, not dependent on the Count's word, of the date on which his wife left Blackwater Park. The Count names his own. He and his wife depart without interference. Walter waits in the house until the Count's agent brings back the sealed letter, which is to be destroyed unopened, and Walter owes him the satisfaction of a gentleman abroad at a later day. Walter accepts, requiring only that the letter be burnt before his eyes. The Count calls for coffee, sits down at the writing table and writes all night, slip after slip of bold manuscript snowing down around his chair, while his wife watches Walter with steady, vindictive malice, remarking that in her husband's place she would have laid him dead on the hearthrug. At 8, the agent brings the letter. It is burnt. The Count wrings Walter's hand, implores him solemnly to take care of Miss Halcombe, and drives off, the scarred stranger's cab following. The Count's confession, as Walter reads it, is a monument of vanity and candour. He and Sir Percival both needed money. Anne Catherick's likeness to Lady Glyde suggested the whole design. The two women were to change names, places, and destinies, gaining £30,000 and burying Sir Percival's secret forever. He had watched at the lake, dosed Anne to strengthen her for the journey to London, removed the doctor, the servants, and the housekeeper, hidden Marian in the old wing, and deceived Laura into travelling alone. Anne was lured into his house, where the sight of strangers threw her into convulsions. The doctor registered her death on the 25th, before Laura had even arrived, the fatal weak place no effort could alter. Laura was drugged with medicated water and smelling salts, dressed in Anne's clothes, certified by 2 compliant medical men, and delivered to the asylum on the 27th. The false Lady Glyde was buried at Limmeridge with every dignity. He asserts his own innocence of unnecessary crime, praises his wife's conjugal devotion, and confesses his one weakness, his fatal admiration for Marian, which twice restrained his hand. The independent proof follows. At the livery stables, the order book records a brougham to Count Fosco on the 26th of July, and the driver remembers the fattest gentleman he ever drove, in a mortal hurry about the lady's luggage, and the lady's name on the boxes, Lady Glyde, his own wife's maiden name. armed with the certificate of death, Sir Percival's dated letter announcing the journey, the order book and the driver, Walter goes with the lawyer's partner to Cumberland. The uncle, placed firmly between two alternatives, capitulates and receives them. The tenants who followed the false funeral are summoned to Limmeridge House. Laura is led in among them. The conspiracy is read aloud, the dates proved, the driver produced. The lawyer declares the case proved by the plainest evidence he has ever heard in his life, and the oldest tenant leads the cheers. There she is, alive and hearty. In the churchyard before them all, the false inscription is struck off the marble, and in its place one line is engraved. Anne Catherick, July 25th, 1850. Some weeks later, Walter is in Paris on an engraver's errand with Pesca. A stranger with a scar visits Pesca and leaves him shaken, and that morning the crowd at the morgue is heaving round the door. Inside the glass screen lies an immense dead man, stabbed exactly over the heart, his clothes the disguise of a French artisan, and on his left arm, where the brand of the Brotherhood was burnt, 2 deep cuts in the form of a T for traditore have obliterated the mark. The hand that struck him was never traced. The body was identified by an anonymous letter to his wife and buried at Père Lachaise, where the Countess still hangs funeral wreaths with her own hand. Her biography of him declares that he died a martyr to the sacred principles of order. The rest is quiet. A son is born to Walter and Laura, with Marian for godmother. In time, Laura's uncle dies, struck by paralysis, and the lawyer summons them to Limmeridge. In the little room that was once Walter's studio, Marian lifts the child, kicking and crowing in her arms, and presents him to his father. Not a baby to be spoken of familiarly, but one of the landed gentry of England, the heir of Limmeridge. And Marian, the good angel of their lives, ends the story. I think the whole meaning of the book is folded into its opening sentence. This is the story of what a woman's patience can endure and what a man's resolution can achieve. Reading it, I kept coming back to those 2 ideas. Nearly every good person in the story is a woman who endures. Laura enduring her marriage, Marian enduring insult and fever, Anne Catherick enduring the asylum, the housekeeper enduring her master's insolence. And the plot is moved, in the end, by the stubborn resolution of one ordinary drawing master who simply refuses to stop. I believe the author is also issuing a warning about the law. He says plainly at the start that if the machinery of the law could be trusted, this story would have been told in a court of justice. But the law, he writes, is still the pre-engaged servant of the long purse. So the book itself becomes the courtroom. The story is deliberately told by a chain of witnesses, each speaking only to what they know, as if the reader were a juror. I think that structure is the point. When the official courts are closed to the powerless, the only tribunal left is the truth, carefully assembled and patiently heard. The story highlights how fragile a person's existence can be when it depends on documents. Laura is alive, yet she is legally dead, because a certificate, a funeral and an inscription say so. Sir Percival is a baronet, yet he is nobody, because a line in a register says otherwise. I think the author may be drawing attention to how easily paper truth can bury lived truth, and how the people who control the papers, the certificates, and the keys to the vestry can steal a life, a name, or a fortune. The book also has a great deal to say about women, marriage, and money. Laura's £20,000 is the true object of the conspiracy, and the long battle over her settlement shows her property being traded over her head, while her guardian sleeps and her lawyer protests in vain. I believe the author is criticising a system in which a woman's fortune, and therefore her safety, depends entirely on the honesty of the men around her. The asylum is part of the same warning. Anne is, in Sir Percival's words, just mad enough to be shut up and just sane enough to ruin him. The story shows how easily a troublesome woman can be declared mad, and how hard it is to be believed sane again. I was struck too by how often the book warns against trusting surfaces, while showing everyone deceived by them. Marian has a plain, almost masculine face and the noblest nature in the story. Count Fosco is charming, fat, gentle with mice and birds, and utterly dangerous. Laura and Anne are mistaken for each other by the whole world because their faces are alike. Even the villain is allowed to deliver the sharpest criticism of respectable society. The comfortable maxim that crime causes its own detection is, he says, mere claptrap that lets society sleep. I think the author lets him say it because it is partly true. There is a quieter moral thread as well. The scripture line about the sins of the fathers being visited on the children is quoted in the story, and it fits. One man's thoughtless wrong fathers 2 daughters, one raised in privilege and one in shame, and their likeness becomes the engine of the crime. And kindness to the helpless is made the real measure of character. Walter's promise to a stranger at midnight, Marian lifting a wounded spaniel from the boathouse, the loyal friend who sheltered Anne. The villains are known by what they do to the powerless. Finally, I think the book is cautious about revenge. Walter wants justice more than vengeance, and when he lets the Count go in exchange for the confession, retribution arrives anyway, from other hands, in the fire in the vestry and the cuts on a dead man's arm. The suggestion, as I read it, is that human resolution should aim at truth and protection, and leave punishment to a larger justice. That, to me, is what the author hoped a reader would carry away. Be patient, be resolute, distrust smooth surfaces, guard the vulnerable, and do not expect the law alone to make things right. Thank you for staying till the end of The Woman in White. You obviously are a glutton for punishment. Please hit the like icon if you thought this video deserves it, so other people get to see it. Let me know in the comments which book you would like me to read to you next. Now YouTube have put on screen a channel subscribe icon, and below it my latest video for you to check out. See you next time.